So in terms of rules, what we're talking about, and this is a really good place to start going a bit deeper. Mm-hmm. For human beings, rules are different than what the guide presents as spiritual law. So a rule basically says, don't do that or. What spiritual law says is that every cause creates an effect. And he doesn't use the word karma very often, but it sounds very similar to how we understand karma, that if you create negativity, it will come back at you. It's an immutable law. You put negativity out in the world, and it's simply a matter of time before you experience what you've put out. Now, the tricky part is that amount of time could involve 3 lifetimes.
Or 3 minutes.
Or 3 minutes. Now, people can understand the 3-minute part. We got that, okay? So I yell at somebody, and my foot guns the accelerator, and I get a ticket. We got that. Okay, what is the message? Don't get angry while you're driving in the car. Okay? But it is very difficult for human beings, for instance, to see someone getting away with something their entire life and not seeing any retribution, not seeing cause and effect come into that person's consciousness. Mm-hmm. Okay? We have a hard time with that. We want cause and effect to link up and complete the cycle in a single lifetime.
Jan?
Yes.
I think this is applicable, but I was talking to somebody lately, and I just began to realize that how important it is for a lot of people, the concept of prophecy, biblical prophecy or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I guess you see that a lot in fundamentalism, but I didn't realize until lately that there's a lot of emphasis put on that. And I wonder, could you address that in the light of what you're talking about now, or does that apply?
No, it applies. I'd be happy to. What the guide is saying, and I'm not picking out specific quotes because I would have my nose in the lecture and my brain wouldn't operate for this teleconference. What the guide is saying is that some people do get a clue about what's going on. There are mediums. There are people with psychic ability. There are people who can sense into a larger cause and effect that the rest of us can't see. And to one extent or another, they can become seers, S-E-E-R. Mm-hmm. They can become prophets. Because all a prophet is doing is telling you what's going to happen. I went into detail last time about some scientific facts, and I'm very wary of doing that too many times. But, for instance, anyone who could look into their crystal ball and tell us where the world is going economically right now, if we thought they would write, that would be like a biblical prophet to us right now. People would flock to that person. They would be grateful. That person could make them feel unafraid of what's to come because he might be able to outline it a bit. And so instead of going into the darkness, into going into the unknown, we'd simply say, okay, it's going to be bad for 9 and 8. Remember the prophecy about 7 years of famine? 7 years of fat, 7 years of famine from Joseph?
Right.
Okay. If you didn't know what was going to happen, then you might foolishly just be extravagant with your 7 years of fat. And then when the famine came along, you might feel like it was terrible. But if you knew the entire 14-year plan, you could get through it. And that's what they did. And that's what prophets can do for us. Now, sometimes they look miraculous because they're predicting the weather. But other prophets are really talking about spiritual cause and effect. They're telling us that if we don't hold our families with love, if we don't hold our communities with integrity, that we will have a disintegration of our societies. that is to a certain degree a kind of prophecy.
It would seem like it would be difficult. It'd be an opportunity to make mistakes about that if you started speculating about what a prophecy is supposed to be and then interjected into present time there, you might not be right.
Yes, so I'm going to use the word medium because I think that the prophets were mediums, that they were sensing into the spirit world. Yes, the clarity, the purity of the medium is definitely going to affect the message.
Mm-hmm.
So
what about the layperson, though, that reads stuff and then they try to interpret it?
Well, to some extent, we all have to take responsibility for who we believe. So this is where religion went when we stopped being in the medieval ages and we came into the place where people could make their own decisions. There's a value in that, but there will be a period of time where we don't know enough and we'll make ignorant interpretations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as humanity moves forward, lurches forward, age after age after age, we go through a period of childhood and adolescence in handling more and more self-responsibility. So you could analyze this in terms of religion, where religion simply used to be given to you on a spoon, where you didn't even understand the language that was being spoken. And then you got to the point where lay people could go to college and not become priests or rabbis, simply to learn and to become more educated. And where you have discussion groups nowadays in communities where you study the Bible, and some of those study groups are fabulous. Those guys are scholars. But a prophet is someone that it's kind of like everybody votes for who's the prophet. And then you have people who say that's a false prophet. It's almost like a spiritual election. Okay? So, Harry, you probably would be very interested there are several lectures on the Bible. If you can't find them, I'll give you the numbers to look at, or I'll email them to you.
Okay.
I love the way the guide talks about the Bible, because he says, yes, there's a lot of truth there, and there is distortion. So the guide simply recognizes that there were politics, and there were a lot of other things going on. It would be lovely if we had a pure spiritual work Bible. If we had a perfect Bible to work from. But even the Bible itself has gone through many, many iterations and editing processes and changes. And ultimately, what this work is about, which is also described in Decisions and Tests, this work is about finding the place in you that feels what is right and going ahead with that. That, yes, children get told what to do, and they don't have to take so much responsibility. But if you are a being who is looking to accelerate your process and take more responsibility for your task. Now, if you don't want to do that, don't. You'll still do spiritual work. Okay, you don't get out of it just because you turn away and turn around and go someplace else. But it will be different. But if you say, I want to know, and I'm going to follow my heart, and I'm going to explore, and I'm going to do what I think is right, at that point, you may be tested, which is the other half of the lecture. But check back. Did I answer your question, Harry?
Uh-huh.
Okay.